Hello, my name is Dr. Luke Bell. I'm lecturer in molecular horticulture at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. This is a screencast of material originally made available for the module Principles of Horticulture and Crop Production from the years 2020 to 2025. Please note that some of the details may now be outdated.
So the learning outcomes are to describe the botany and features of the broccoli plant life cycle, give examples of broccoli types and cultivars and the seasonal requirements for annual and biennial types, explain the optimal growth conditions for a broccoli crop and the nutrition and irrigation requirements needed, understand the harvest process of broccoli and how florets are stored post-harvest. So I'll go through the kind of characteristics of broccoli as a crop. So broccoli is part of the Italica group of Brassicales. Like cabbage, broccoli is a cool season crop which is generally quite frost tolerant. Plants are usually biennial, but they can also be cultivated as annuals through vernalization of seedlings, and I'll go on to talk about that a little bit more in a bit. So some cultivars which can be grown in warmer regions are annuals and have a lower vernalization requirement. They're widely grown in temperate and subtropical regions of both hemispheres. So broccoli is generally more tolerant of heat stress than some other brassica types. Optimal vegetative growth is between 12 and 20 degrees centigrade. Compact floret heads do not form well above 25 degrees C, as this promotes flowering. Growth is slow below 5 degrees C, but the plants can withstand temperatures as low as -7. So broccoli can be crossed quite easily with other Brassica oleracea varieties. The plants share similar characteristics to other varieties in the early stages of growth, so it's not really you can't really tell the difference between a cabbage plant and a broccoli plant, for example, before a certain stage of development. The leaves, like cabbage, are quite thick and waxy, and they tend to be quite broad. And the leaf colour of the broccoli plants tends to range from a greyish blue kind of colour to green. So broccoli is harvested for its flowering or immature flowering tissues. What a broccoli floret actually is a cluster of different flower heads. The heads at maturity are around about 40 centimeters across. And as the tissues develop, they lose the sort of characteristic compactness of a typical broccoli floret. And what happens is the flower buds start to separate and start to develop into flowers. So as you can see in this slide here, you can see that the broccoli tissue, what would be consumed and harvested, is starting to develop flowers. And so this plant is obviously now unsaleable because of this. So at full flower, broccoli plants can be very large or quite large, about 1.4 meters tall and around about ½ a meter across. Broccoli cultivars are generally self-pollinating, but a large number of flowers may be cross-pollinated by insects such as bees. A single plant is capable of producing up to about 230 grams of seed. So broccoli cultivars are classed according to their vernalization requirement, and as I've touched upon in the previous screencasts, vernalization is a requirement for brassica plants to initiate flowering. And so when the plants are exposed to a period of cold weather below a certain temperature, this initiates the flowering response and therefore triggers the formation of these reproductive tissues, which is what a broccoli floret is. So annual cultivars have a very low vernalization requirement and require little exposure to cold in order to form broccoli heads. Cool nighttime temperatures may be sufficient in the early spring for these types to be vernalized, whereas the biennial cultivars, which are overwintered, they have a much higher vernalization requirement and need to be exposed to colder temperatures for much longer. There are two main types of broccoli, the oldest of which is called sprouting broccoli. You may have heard it referred to as purple sprouting broccoli. So this type of broccoli, the stems and leaves are edible, as well as the flower heads. There are many different cultivars of this, but the most common is the purple type, but they also come with yellow and white forms. So there's white sprouting broccoli and yellow sprouting broccoli. And this is an overwintering variety of broccoli, and is typically classed as a kind of branching biennial. The second form is probably what you're most familiar with from purchasing in the supermarket, and this is known as the Calabrese type. So the name Calabrese is derived from an area of Italy around Calabria, so Calabrese in Italian. And so that's where it's thought to have originated from. It's by far the most economically important type of broccoli, and it can be cultivated as both an annual and as a biennial. Other cultivars are farmed in specific regions. So I mentioned Italy. So Italy generally is a very diverse place for different types of Brassica oleracea. So it's thought that many of the different types may have been domesticated and cultivated there for many hundreds or even thousands of years. And there's a specific type called the Sicilian broccoli, which has this distinct deep purple coloration to its florets. It's often mistakenly called a cauliflower because of its kind of shape and size, but it is actually a broccoli. So Calabrese, most commercial varieties are now F1 hybrids, and they've largely replaced the open pollinated cultivars, and that's because the F1 hybrids have improved uniformity and consistency in their maturation rates. Many of the F1 hybrids nowadays have disease resistance and pest resistance traits, which is obviously advantageous to the grower. However, the seed does come at a premium because of that. And again, like cabbage, as I mentioned in the previous screencast, because they're hybrids, they exhibit this hybrid vigor, so they have vigorous early growth. I'll also just explain about other types of plants which are consumed by humans, which are also referred to as broccoli, but aren't actually of the same species as the broccoli which we might be familiar with in the UK. So there's a type called the Chinese broccoli. So this is Gailan, and it is also a type of Brassica oleracea, but it's not part of the Italica grouping. It's part of the Alboglabra group, which is completely separate. So it forms small floret heads. You can't really see it too well in this slide, but within that cluster of leaves will be a kind of cluster of florets inside there, which is similar to the sprouting broccoli type of floret. And these leaves are harvested with that floret and can also be consumed. So Gailan has no vernalization requirement, so it's much faster growing and is generally cultivated as an annual. So there's another species called Brassica rapa, which again I'll talk about in the following screencasts. It's also known as broccoli rab, and it's a popular crop in southern Europe, but it's a different species to the Brassica oleracea italica variety of broccoli, which is the main focus of this screencast. So the florets of that species are generally smaller and less compact. And the species is also cultivated for its leaves. So you may have heard of rapini leaves, and they're quite bitter, and they're kind of harvested as a kind of baby leaf crop, and that's the same species as this. In terms of broccoli Brassica oleracea crops, these can be direct seeded or established from transplants. Again, the spacing is dictated by the market requirements. Small compact florets may be as close as 10 centimeters together within the rows, and the larger headed types are produced from more wider spacing, so anywhere from 20 to 60 centimeters within the row and 50 to 90 centimeters between the rows. Transplanting is becoming more common in short season regions because it allows a bit of an extension to the season and allows the crops to get off to a much quicker start. Generally, as with cabbage and also with lettuce, as we talked about in previous screencasts, the seedlings are grown in peat blocks, in plug trays or in module trays. And for broccoli, it takes around about 4 to 5 weeks for them to reach the transplanting stage. So in terms of the soil requirements, broccoli does well in soils of around about 6 to 6.5 pH. It has a high nitrogen requirement, and nutrients must be delivered closely to the root zone, as the roots of the broccoli plant aren't too deep and they aren't too wide. Low nitrogen reduces the growth rate of the overall floret quality, so it's important to get the balance right when applying fertilizer to broccoli crops. So typically 2 applications might be made, one at the transplanting stage, and again another side dressing perhaps at the heading stage. On organic soils, there may be little to no need to add additional nitrogen, but excessive nitrogen can promote rapid growth and poor quality open heads. Combined with high temperatures, this can further promote flowering, and so is detrimental to the yields of the crop and the quality of the floret heads. Like cabbage, the crops have a high requirement for boron and molybdenum, and as you can see in this slide, this is a broccoli plant which is suffering from chlorosis, the discoloured leaves, so the distinctive kind of yellowing of the leaves and this kind of yellowish green, kind of lime green patterning of the older leaves is distinctive of nutrient deficiency. So like other brassicas, broccoli can be grown with plastic mulches, so this helps to control weeds, but it also helps to keep soils warm, particularly for the early plantings. It can be used in conjunction with drip irrigation, which is a much more efficient type of irrigation than the kind of broadcast spray and overhead irrigation. So broccoli requires about 2.5 to 3.8 centimeters of water per week to ensure uninterrupted growth. As I've mentioned for cabbage, soil moisture shouldn't drop below 50%, as this will severely impact yields. And it's especially important to maintain high field capacity on sandy soils, as the water tends to drain away much more quickly. Plants are sensitive to drought, and drip irrigation, as I said, is an efficient way of maintaining moisture content in the soil around the root zone of the plants. You can see in this slide it's quite common in the UK for brassica crops to be irrigated through spray irrigation. However, this isn't really the best practice, as it can promote foliar disease in the plants, and it's also very inefficient compared to drip irrigation and micro irrigation. So broccoli is usually harvested by hand using teams of people, as you can see in this slide. The florets are cut and trimmed with a knife in the field, and in some cases they can also be packed in the field if it's for the fresh market. It may be necessary to pass through a field more than once, as florets tend to mature at different rates. So F1 hybrids have improved this. However, variations within the crop and within the field may mean that the heads don't all mature at the same time. So the florets are typically packed into wooden crates and boxes, but they can be sensitive to bruising during this process. And here's another slide of some broccoli in a crate awaiting processing. So broccoli has a high respiration rate, and so therefore must be cooled quite quickly after harvest. It should be stored around about 0 degrees C and at high relative humidity, 95 to 100%. In regions where the broccoli florets have to be transported over very long distances, they're often packed in ice. So this practice helps preserve and extend the shelf life of the broccoli heads, but it can induce discoloration and freezing damage to them too. Typically the florets can be packed in plastic, and this again helps reduce water loss and preserve shelf life. So in terms of production statistics, again, unfortunately, the FAO statistics kind of bundle broccoli and cauliflower together, so I'll cover both within this slide. Again, China is the biggest producer of broccoli and cauliflower in the world, producing about 10.7 million tons in 2019. India, likewise, is a big producer of broccoli and cauliflower. And also the USA, where crops can typically be grown all year round. There are other big producers in Europe, such as Spain and France, but also, again, Mexico is a big producer. And also the UK is actually the 10th biggest producer in the world of broccoli and cauliflower. And so even though the tons per hectare aren't particularly high, it's quite an ideal environment in the United Kingdom for cultivating broccoli and cauliflower. So in summary, broccoli is a cool season crop intolerant of high temperatures. Plants are harvested for their edible florets. The two main types are sprouting broccoli and Calabrese. F1 hybrids have helped to improve the quality and uniformity of broccoli. Cultivars can be annual or biennial. Annual types are harvested in summer and autumn. Biennial types are overwintered and harvested in the spring. Broccoli crops have a high nitrogen, boron and molybdenum requirement, and also a high irrigation requirement. Florets are harvested by hand and must be stored under cold temperatures to preserve quality.